shorty, what your name is? Do you have a man? Who you came with?
I think we'll see.
We'll work it out.
We gonna work it out.
You know what I'll do? I'll try to adjust the volume on and edit and post if I need to.
Let's do
that. Y'all ready?
Yeah, we've been ready.
Welcome back, y'all. Street Academy Podcast, where we keep 1 foot in the academy and 1 foot in the street. Z's, we back. Hey. Season two. Season two. Hey man, we here, y'all.
We are in y'all. And we're working on a mantra to explain exactly what the Street Academy Podcast is. So we're working on it. We're gonna figure out exactly what it is, but I'm just gonna read where we're going. Okay, where we're going with our mantra. So the Street Academy Podcast is a space for conversation where Black people come together to discuss and have deeper conversations about what affects the Black community. Our intent is to break down the barriers of class, gender, and educational status, and to shed light on the counter academy that already exists within our community. Something like that.
Yeah. Basically, we just dope. Like, that's all. Like, that's what it is. Like, we just doing dope stuff, man. That's what it's all about. Street Academy. But yeah, we're still formulating the official thing.
One other piece is we're here to illustrate the intellectual caliber of Black people from all backgrounds. And to have an equal playing,
I'm excited about that part.
An equal playing field for Black people of all backgrounds to have rigorous intellectual conversation about current events and provocative topics.
Yes,
that's probably the clearest one. So we might end up going somewhere with that.
Yeah, we might have to keep. I think Amber probably came up with that.
No, we all came up with it. We all worked on this together.
I mean, I was watching Snowfall while we was doing it. I ain't gonna even lie. I was in the meeting, but I was watching Snowfall.
What is Snowfall?
I like watching. It's a movie about crack in LA. A show about crack in LA.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, let's start our check-ins then, since we started with Snowfall. What's been going on with you, John?
Man, what's been going on? Man, life is great. Life is actually pretty good. This Black History Month has been busy for me. I've been having a lot of speaking engagements. The good thing is though, I've been getting paid for these speaking engagements. So like half of them. And I don't know if you know the story of Taraji P. Henson, but she talks about how she was grinding in Hollywood and Hollywood was paying her this really low amount. And even when she did The Curious Case of Benjamin Button or something like that, even though she was a main character, they pay her like a really low amount. And so Tyler Perry asked her to be in a film, to star in a film. She did it. And he said, well, how much do you want me to pay you? How much do you charge? That she had been getting paid. And can y'all hear me?
It went out for a second for me, but
it just gave me a message. I just wanted to make sure y'all can hear me. So then he was like, no, you deserve more than that. And so he gave her a much higher salary. And ever since then, she won't take anything lower than what Tyler Perry gave her, right? So that same thing happened to me, right? I've been kind of doing things or whatever, favors and stuff for people, but I did a presentation for a Black organization, and they was like, listen, we're going to pay you X amount of dollars. And it was the most I had ever gotten paid to do like an hour speaking event. And I was like, I'm not taking anything lower than this at this point, because that was kind of like this thing. So I don't know. I've been thinking about like business and like, all right, man, should I do like a LLC and start like formulating and like making official, some of the things that I got planned and things I got going, instead of just doing it in kind of more informal grassroots ways. I'm like, man, maybe I should kind of make these things official. So I've been looking into that.
All right, that's cool. I love that too. Mm-hmm. Let's go.
So Amber, what you got going on?
Okay. I'm feeling good, feeling great right now. I had a really long week last week. because I am a teaching fellow at the Harvard Graduate School of Education for 2 different courses. And it's just because of our students are all over the world. We are accommodating different time zones. And so we have a 7:30 a.m. course like several times. I have to just be on at 7:30 in the morning several times. And I'm just not used to that. Like I'll be rolling out of bed way later. So I'm still just getting adjusted to that whole thing. But it's felt really rewarding to just experience these people from all over the world in their setting. Because when I was up in Boston, I was able to be a teaching fellow then because I was there, and I didn't even think I would have the opportunity to do it again, but the courses are virtual. But being on campus is different because you see everybody in that context. Everyone is in Cambridge, but here virtually you see everybody in their home environments. And I don't know, it just feels different. And it's good. And so I'm really enjoying this. And it feels good to be co-creating a course with one of my colleagues that I really love dearly. Her name is Tina Blythe. And we're doing it together. And I just appreciate the camaraderie that we have with the course. It's just great. It feels really rewarding right now. And it feels like one thing that happened that I really feel good about is I'm not necessarily an expert at the content. And so I'm helping Tina, like we're creating this course, but like when we're making the different decisions about the course, I can't necessarily always speak from the content point of view, but I can speak about structure and about like my intuition about how things should go or not go. And something that it's like we were having a discussion about a particular piece, and I just was like, I don't feel like this is it. I just don't think that we should do this, basically. And then we kind of settled on something different. And then I was like, okay, I'm glad that we worked on that, because she wanted to do it. I was just like, oh, I don't think so. And so once I said, like, once we had settled on a different thing, I was like, I'm glad that we decided something different, because my chest was tight about that. And she was like, oh, anytime you feel something about something, I pay attention to that. I listen to that because I trust your intuition. And I'm just like, I appreciate that so much. It's just like, I'm learning throughout the years to trust my intuition more, but in a work environment for my colleague to say, like, I trust your intuition and your gut instinct about things and the way we do things, that just felt really validating. And that felt just good, because, sometimes I just question, like, what am I bringing to the table? But it's just like, you have something that you can't necessarily explain to folks until you get in that moment. And it's just like, that's wisdom from another place. So I'm feeling good about that. So having a good weekend, having a good resting weekend. My mother's birthday was yesterday. We're gonna go eat something today. And
shout out to my dudes.
My
dudes. One time.
And so I'm feeling good.
Man, how's she been doing? She been doing good.
She has been doing good.
Mom's been doing better.
Yeah.
Cool, man.
Thanks for asking.
Definitely keeping up my prayers.
Feeling good, feeling great. How have you been, Jackie?
Man, I have been deep in my dissertation hole.
Woo!
Trying to officially be that doctor in May. So, I've been super deep in my dissertation hole. I finished one big piece of it earlier this month and shared it with a few folks and got some positive feedback. So now I'm on to the next big part, trying to, make it work.
Okay.
That's consuming most everything about my life right now.
Okay.
Amber, can you hear Jackie pretty good?
Yeah, I can.
You can? Okay. So yeah, maybe it is. Let me try. I'm gonna go get these other headphones and see if I can hear her. Hold on. Better.
All right. I guess we'll just continue going with the conversation. Oh.
Amber, I love your little interpretive dances.
You like it? I'm feeling movement today. You know why? Oh, so if anybody's interested, this is why I feel like I'm also so perky right now, is because I don't know, do you have Apple Music? For those who have Apple Music, and I know it's bad for the artists, Spotify, all the streaming services are bad, yet it's just the way that I listen to music. So my apologies to all the musicians out there. Yeah. And so I've been listening to Apple Music, and they actually, if you go to their tab, where it's just like Black History Month, it's just like browse. And so you go to like Black History Month and you click there, and they have playlists from different celebrities and like influencers and stuff. And so I've been listening to the Angela Rye playlist, and it is so good. It's like, it's just like,
I can see that being really
you know how
good.
she's already fiery or whatever. It's just like
Yeah.
every track on here. It's just like I'm feeling it, and she has a flow to it too. I'm just like she start off with Janelle Monáe, and then she goes to I don't know how to pronounce his name, and I feel bad that I don't know how to pronounce his name. Fela Kuti. How do you pronounce his name?
Fela Kuti.
Fela Kuti.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so it goes to a track with that, and then she goes into like the young gifted in black, goes into a change is gonna come, and it's just like the flow is just so nice, and I'm just like, black, I feel so black. Yeah. It just feels good. So that's just for all of y'all who have Apple Music. Go check out the playlist that are there. There's a number of different artists. Erica Badu has one. I was listening to hers the other day too. So yeah. So but speaking of feeling so black, that's our subject for today.
Let's go.
What does it mean to be black? What does it mean to be black? Hella black, hella proud, hella educated. Loving that shirt, John. So,
and I want to explain this at some point too, but yeah.
We definitely gonna have that opportunity. So now, guys, we are gonna have segments in our podcast, and this first segment is gonna be called "Off the Georgia Dome," where we look at the topic, and each of the co-hosts spend about a minute to just say our free thoughts about the topic. So let's go off the Georgia Dome real quick. Who we gonna start with? Let's start with the hella black Negro in the building.
Okay.
So what does it mean to be black?
What does it mean to be black? Black is beautiful. Black is antiquity. Black is the beginning. Black is forever. Black is eternity. Black is, oh man, when I think about black people say, I don't want to limit myself to being black. I feel like when people call me a black man or a black scholar or a black artist or a black creative, I feel like I expand more than just saying I'm an artist, so I'm a scholar. Like, I feel like it's even deeper when I put black on it as opposed to being limited by being black. So yeah, black is everything.
Hey, I felt that.
It's beautiful.
Let's go.
Like that needs to be like written and framed somewhere.
Listen,
I'm glad we're recording this. Yeah. Jackie, what does it mean to be black?
Man, I think about this so much. And before we went live, John and I were talking about Judas and the Black Messiah. And it reminded me of the whole controversy because Daniel Kaluuya, if I butchered his name, I apologize, but he is British. He's Afro-British. And so there was a lot of controversy around him getting the role of Fred Hampton, who of course is African-American. And so when I think about black and who gets to claim black, I don't know. I just feel like that's just so much contested space about who gets to claim black identity.
I love that. And so for me, that's where I feel too. When I think about what does it mean to be black, I think about how people in different ways try to police blackness. Even black people, we police blackness too, because being black means something. And we've gotten oppressed because we were black in some ways, and then at the same time we get to celebrate in specific ways because we're black. And so it's just like, it's something that we take pride in. So it's just like, in one way, it's just like, everybody can't have it because everybody ain't it. And at the same time, it's just like, we know everybody want to be it. And I would say when it comes to being black, it's like, how we've heard everybody want to be black, but don't nobody want to be black. I feel like that's a thing. But like, when I think about being black, it is just like, it is the littest shit ever. Like,
it's so amazing. It's so wonderful.
It gives you just I feel like it can give you a perspective. It depends on how you interact with your own blackness, how you think about your black identity. There's so much there, because it's like, if this is silly, but
I love how Amber, like, she stopped and laughed at her own punchline.
I enjoy myself.
That's black. That's black right there. We don't need nobody else around. We just be
good.
Actually, that actually goes to my exact point, because that's what I was laughing about. I'm like, this is a riff off of like, if a tree falls in the forest, did anybody hear it? Did it really fall? So I'm like, if a nigga is by themselves, or if a black person is by themselves, are they black? So it's just like, I think you just answered the question. I I believe that they are, no
They
matter where they
are.
are.
Yeah.
And yet it's just like that understanding of that person.
I
As
almost want to challenge that though,
I know, but I
go ahead.
challenge it
Yeah,
too. I do
yeah.
too, because now I'm just like, does that really work? Because we have people like, I don't even know the who's the guy out there in St. Louis with Brianna, with Breonna
Oh,
Taylor.
Daniel Cameron.
I try not to remember his name. So yeah, him.
Fair.
People like that. It's just like, is he black? Does he get his card revoked? Whatever, even being black. So anyway, that's off the Georgia Dome. That's where we are. So now we're about to just dive right into this topic. Let's go. What does it mean to be black?
What does it mean to be
How do we want to talk about the interaction of all of these pieces? Jackie, it looks like you got something.
No, because as soon as you said like that whole example of like being alone, and John was like, "Oh, I want to challenge that." I was like, "Of course, the sociologist is about to to challenge it."
Listen,
so I kind of want to hear more, but I have an idea of where he might be going.
Let's go, John.
So I agree with you that for Black people, we're us. We don't necessarily need others to validate our Blackness. But I feel though, as Black Americans, what I found in looking at and talking to both in a formal setting, like doing actual research studies, and then just kind of informal and just talking to people, that a lot of times Black Americans understand their Blackness in relationship to whiteness. So whatever white people do, the opposite of what they do then is Blackness. And so we're always just, and I don't think it's necessarily a thing that I'm not harping on us or saying that, because I think we all do it, but I think that's just a product of our history, right? Our history in this country, the African American identity, a large part of that is based in oppression. Like that's part of our story. We're trying to get to a place where we can move where that is not a main part of our story, but we're not that far away from slavery. You know what I'm saying? If we're honest. And so that's still a large part of our identity. So we look at white people and we like, oh, well, white people do that. Well, we do the opposite. And then that's Blackness. You know what I'm saying? Or Blackness is anything that's not related to another culture. I think that exists with African American identity. And I think because our identity has been stripped from us so much, we're constantly doing like we literally did a whole great migration. We did a whole migration to whole other regions of the country just so that we can find a place to be ourselves. And that's not necessarily something that I think other Black people within the African diaspora really can relate to. So to them, they look at us as, man, y'all don't know who y'all are. Y'all always tripping about who's Black and who's not. And it's because that identity, stripping us of our identity, was one of the key ways in which they were able to enslave us. And so we've been spending all this time trying to figure it out and trying to find it. And, Harlem Renaissance and the new Negro movement. And okay, well, are we this? Well, are we that? And so when we do things like, oh, well, this person is Black, but this person ain't Black. Kamala Harris is really Black, but she also part Indian and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I can critique it, but then at the same time, I'm like, but that's just us still trying to figure it out. You know what I'm saying? And we're not far away from where being Black literally meant property. We're not that far away from that. So I feel like, I still give us some patience. So that's why I kind of push back on that, in that I still feel like the Black American identity, a lot of it is centered around whatever is the opposite of whiteness.
That is not where I thought you were going with that at all.
There is so much there.
Yeah.
And I wonder, you just left me with so much. Jackie, you got something?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I want to know what Jackie thought I was going, and then what you think.
I mean, when I think about Blackness and I think about Black people, I think about community. And so I think that, even going back to the gatekeeping point that you mentioned, Amber, that I think is, I sometimes grapple with, because, on one hand, it's like, okay, well, if you have a particular Black parent, or like, different sorts of like connections to Blackness. I mean, I'm not talking about like white people being Black. I'm talking about like you have a parent, like you have a African lineage, um, that um, you're Black. Like nobody could take your literal DNA away from you,
Mm-hmm.
but at the same time, how folks bend that DNA. Somebody might take a DNA test and be like, "Oh, it has come
I'm
back that I
100%
am,"
that bitch.
or I'm 5% Nigerian and now I'm Black. So,
Mm.
I think that there's something to be said about like the validity in gatekeeping Blackness, but also like obviously it's not super clean. Um, but going back to the point about
Mm.
community, I mean, I thought you were gonna say Blackness, like to an extent, Blackness is about getting that validation from community. So like you could be by yourself and say I'm Black, but until the community also accepts you as Black, then that individual Blackness only goes but so far. And I think for
That's a
some
good
people,
point.
like it's not like a difficult threshold to cross. Like I can walk into the street right now, I don't think that there is anybody who will be like, is she Black, is she not Black,
Mm.
you know but that, there are some other people, like we just talked about Daniel Cameron. Like we might at first say that he's Black, but then after seeing how he acts, it's like, are you really,
And so,
sir?
you know what that makes me think of? It's so important that you said that piece too about, are you Black? And I think that has become a question for us because it's about trust. And it's
Mm-hmm.
about, how people, and I know we were going to talk about this one time about the whole idea of like all skin folk and kinfolk. And so it's just like, although you may be Black on the outside or racially and looking at you visually, you have these characteristics of a Black person. That does not mean that you have a specific ethos or logos or patho, any of that, or a particular way of thinking. And so it's just like, in some ways we've had to like be a gatekeeper or police it because it's just like we can't trust everything on the outside. So when it's just like, are you Black or are you Black? Or are you Black blackity Black or Black? And so I mean, and that also going back to John's point about how Blackness is contrasted with whiteness, it's just like, and how it doesn't seem as though the Black American identity has separated from the days or the kind of the residue, the artifacts of enslavement, and how so much of the way that we think now comes from that. Even in this idea of like, are you Black, it becomes important because we think about the overseers back then. It's just like a lot of times the Black other Africans were used to be those who would inflict harm. And so it's just like they're created this separation between Blacks and types of Blacks, and then also when it comes to, of course, the field slave, house slave thing, it's just like that again becomes like this separation of types of Black, and that had real social consequences. and
Right.
and it had real it mattered. But your experience on the plantation mattered,
Yeah.
and your proximity to whiteness mattered and shaped your experience as a Black person or as a slave. So when it comes to like even defining Blackness, and if whiteness is here, it's like your proximity to whiteness literally matters, has consequences, shapes your daily life. And so the way that we've continued to think about that, it has it just reveals itself in different ways now, 100 years later, not even that far really, as we're still thinking like, and we're still looking at like, who's Black, who's not Black, because can I trust you, can I not trust you, are you um are you paid by the man? Like, and so going back to the idea of Judas and what's it called again, Judas and the Black
Judas and the
Messiah.
Black Messiah.
Yeah. And so even, I don't know if you all saw that documentary on Netflix about Malcolm X, but it's just like one of his closest, I don't remember the guy's name, but his closest guy,
Right.
that was the informant. Are you kidding me? And so
Yeah.
it's just like, are you Black or are you like, it's just like, is there something else that makes you more Black than somebody else? Is there a certain allegiance to your people, to your cause, that could warrant a person more Black than another person?
It's so interesting though, and even talking about that and going into not only, can y'all hear me? Because my microphone was acting up. Okay. Going to Judas and the Black Messiah and also Malcolm. But then, and I was listening to another podcast talk about it, and I've often thought about this as well. Sometimes we look at those people like, this is going to be a spoiler alert. So if you haven't seen Judas and the Black Messiah,
it's out already.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Well, if you haven't seen it, I don't want to spoil it for you.
But you was on the road. Go ahead, spoil it.
Well.
He also spoiled something based on a true story. Like
actually, that's true too.
Yeah. I mean, you know what it is.
It's
you know
just
what
a
it's
matter
about.
of history. Yeah.
Okay. So then
Good
this
point, Jackie.
Okay, yeah. So then this isn't
history.
You can literally just like Google it. You'll find it. But yeah, so when we think about those people who were informants, right? Particularly this guy, Bill O'Neill, who was an informant for, the Chicago Black Panther Party. Part of it was because he was stealing. He was like stealing. He was a thief. And then, they called him and they said, well, if you don't want to go to prison for 2 to 5 years, then we need you to be an informant. And that happened a lot, right? Yeah. I think that probably happened in the Malcolm X case. I'm pretty sure, but that happened a lot. So then the larger question is, well, why was he stealing? You see what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Why did he feel the need to do that? Why is he living in poverty? If he was never in this situation, if he was middle class, or if he had more opportunities, he probably wouldn't be stealing, and then he probably would have had more respect for what Fred Hampton and him was doing. So yeah, we can come down on dude. You know what I'm saying? Because at the end of the day, we all kind of like, listen, what you did was still wrong. It was still messed up. But in looking at the bigger picture, I still blame white people because it's Black History Month. And so Black History Month, white people get blamed for everything.
You know what though? And I'm glad you went there because I reason in that way as well, in the sense that it's just like, it's still this whole idea. It's morphed in different ways. So it's just like snitches get stitches. And it's just like, it's the idea of like you colluding with the man or whoever. One of my favorite songs of all time is, how does this go? I don't know, but it's like,
well, if you book, no.
Actually, though, it is.
Actually, that is my favorite song of all
time. But it's a similar track. It's the one that's "Don't Hit Me on My Next Tail Chirp." Damn it, why am I forgetting? It's just "Don't hit me on my next tail chirp unless you're trying to call about some other work." Why? You know what I'm saying?
I'd never. Jackie, you know that one?
I am unfamiliar.
And Jackie, the queen of trap. I don't think I heard that one.
Don't hit me on my next tail chirp.
Who sang that?
Maceo.
Maceo.
All you player hatters out there, you tune into the sounds of the Southern Style DJs. Now I'm about to read it. But anyway, we're gonna have to come back on "Don't Hit Me on My Next Tail Chirp." But basically, that whole song is talking about. I feel like I feel like I want to do a study on that song because it's just basically people, it's Black people telling other Black people what you do to not get, to not be surveilled, because it's all about surveillance. So it's just like, don't hit me on my next tail chirp if you're trying to talk about some work.
Okay.
And so
that makes sense.
Just like, and I just love that because I feel like it's like a Negro spiritual. It's just a different kind of Negro spiritual because it's trying to tell you, it's like the Negro spiritual is like, this is the Underground Railroad, like we're trying to get you to freedom. And this one is like, hey, don't, the feds are out there. You can't, they got you wired, brother. Like, don't go to the fryer. Like, I can read some of the lyrics. It makes me very happy actually, because I'm just like, yes, this is, so his, okay, I got it ready. It said, I ain't trying to have them, I ain't trying to have them feds running in my doorway. See, I've been doing this here for a long time. Nigga did 25 years over phone time. That's a long time to be trying to ride out, picking up my phone, like meet me at the hideout. It's just good. It's just good.
That's poetry, baby. That's poetry. Let's use who? Man. Man.
All that's to say though, beautiful. It's just like, I feel like we communicate, that has always reminded me that it's just like, informants are a thing, wiring is a thing, but that's because we're coming from a place where we're trying to get out of something. The bribery comes from, it's typically money related. And it's just like, if the system wasn't here, you wouldn't have so many people being informants and things like that, or because they're trying to like get out of some other situation. So I really respect that point that you made, John. And yet, you got to throw in a yet, what about people like Daniel Cameron?
Wow.
What about him?
Because is that a money situation? Is it because he's like in that instance, I want to have empathy towards all my brothers and sisters. And yet someone like that, I'm like, okay, yeah, the brother's just lost. Is he in the sunken place? Has he just been so programmed that this is his reality? And all I can say is I hope he sees himself in a different way. I feel like I have more empathy for the brother on the corner who ended up being an informant than for somebody like Daniel Cameron.
Yeah, I mean, some folks might argue that in a sick way or a convoluted way that Daniel Cameron is like a modern COINTELPRO informant. I mean, I could see that, but I also think that like the ministry of some Black folks is to like have a wide space for all Black folks to come in and be a part of community, and I am a recipient of that ministry, not necessarily someone who is a excellent leader and practitioner of that ministry. It is
Mm.
very difficult for me to make space for folks who are, I think there are two types of, there are some folks who are like willing to learn and grow and they just like need patience as they learn and grow, and then there are some people who are like, I don't care nothing about what you're talking about. And for that group of folks, it's very hard for me to like create space for them to be in community. And I think
Mm.
Daniel Cameron, like, if he wants to identify as Black, go with God. I wish you the
Godspeed.
best of luck in your life. Yes, I wish you Godspeed. And that's all I have for you. As a matter of fact, there's this clip, and I don't even know how I ended up watching it again recently. It's like one of the clips that lives rent free in the back of your mind. But it was a Whitney Houston clip, and she was on like a talk show or doing an interview or something like that. And
Mhm.
someone was like, "Well, what do you think about Mariah Carey?" And she was like, "I don't." And I was
I was
like,
yes, I saw that. Yes, yeah.
and that's
Let's
exactly how I
go.
feel
Oh, I love
about
Whitney.
Daniel Cameron.
Oh, Whitney
And
was
the
the
rest of
shade
the field.
queen.
Hmm.
Oh,
Wasn't
But
she?
she
Whitney
wasn't
was the shade
necessarily trying
queen.
to be shady in that instance, because like, keep going, Jackie, because I figured you would keep
Yeah, I
talking.
mean, there was like a context to them like trying to
Hmm.
paint Mariah and Whitney as like either competitors or like whatever
Hmm.
they were trying to do, they were trying to lump them together. And she was like, she's in her lane, I'm doing my thing, I'm not,
Exactly.
trying to interfere with her. I don't mean it in like a supportive way. I mean it in a completely petty and shady way. What do I
Mm.
think of Daniel Cameron? I don't. What do I think of the rest of his ilk? I don't,
I
Mm,
like
appreciate that. Yeah.
mm,
go with God, and if he brings you back into the fold, then maybe
mm.
I will think of you at that point in time. But today, uh, you know,
Hmm.
Because Don Lemon, right? 2012 Don Lemon
yes,
is different from
yes, he
is
grew that little fro out, and
listen,
he
yeah, that thing curled
yes,
up.
yes, and he is a whole new person.
Oh, that's
You know what's
great.
crazy? I remember like I was not someone who like understood news and
I love it. It's just like the fro just started connecting him to blackness, like the
it
coil. It's just
did.
like,
It did. There was something about it that just made him come back into the fold. And I remember the very first time I felt like I came to an understanding or recognition of who he was. And it was during um, the response to George Zimmerman's acquittal. People were
Mm,
out in the streets and
mhm.
stuff. And no, I think that's wrong. Maybe it wasn't Trayvon Martin. It might have been Michael Brown.
Mhm.
Um, in either case, Don Lemon was reporting, and it was like a riot in response to a Black boy dying. And
Okay.
he said, I'm out here in the streets, and like it was night, and you see like the smoke and stuff, like those scenes that we very commonly see on the news. And he was like, and obviously there's the stench of marijuana in the air. And I remember
Oh
being
yeah, I remember that.
like,
I
nice.
that was
remember
the very
that.
first time I grabbed my phone, and I was like, who is this man? Like, who is Don
Mhm.
Lemon? I don't know who he is.
Mm.
And I had to like look him up. And I was like, that is the most aside commentary that just don't even make no sense.
Right.
It would be like if I was like, and obviously people have blue shoes on, and I'm like, what does that have to do with anything, and why is that obvious? So yeah, but that's not him anymore. He done turned a corner.
He has, and I think all of us have in different ways. And I know for me too, I feel like my corner turned when I went up to Boston more so than in any other point in my life. I think I was so comfortably in blackness that I wasn't thinking about it as much. Because I'm born and raised in Atlanta. I went to black schools, went to a HBCU, and so once I went up to a place, which goes back to your point, and John, it's like once I saw the whiteness, the contrast of blackness became clearer. And so I feel like I became more black. And so it's just like, but when it was like black against black, it's just like, I ain't thinking about it. But once I went up there and saw the contrast, and it was like, I am a black woman, very much so.
You know what? I'm gonna be honest with you, and I've kind of wanted to have this conversation with you. I noticed that shift with you, Amber, when you went to Harvard. I really did, because I don't know if you remember a conversation, me, you, Ayana,
I know. Okay.
Giselle. You remember that? It was like
Which one? Which one?
It was at the bottom of Berean. It was like something after church or something, and we were, I think we was having dinner or something, and it was like at the bottom of Berean. It was a bunch of people, a bunch of youth or whatever, and we were talking about race in the church and something about, should the church be separate or should the church be,
yeah.
And I remember you was like, no, we need to be together because we are all going to be in heaven. And I was like, no, we need to be separate. We need to be away from them. I'm sick of being around them. I'm tired of it. No.
Oh, man.
And we went back and forth. And then you went to Harvard. And when you got up there, you was, I think the very next Facebook post I saw of you was some Cornell West quote, and you was at a protest, and you was like, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm black, y'all, and I'm blacker than black. Amber went up to Boston and was like, no.
Yeah.
And I mean, I saw your whole shift just happen. It was beautiful. It was beautiful.
It's true though, like quite like
yeah.
And that's why I'm like, and that's why I kind of have a sensitive space to be like, can we give people grace? Because I also know like my own transformation, where it's just like I began to see things more clearly in contrast to whiteness. And then also it was the time that the world was in. Like I went, and I always say this when I talk about my Boston experience, because it's crucial, because it was within a specific context too. It's like I went up to Boston a week before Trayvon Martin's killer was acquitted. So it's just like, it was that context. So it's like, I went up there in the heat of how things began to rise. And so it's just like, Trayvon Martin was a thing when I was going. And once I got there, I remember sitting in the car with the gracious woman who let me stay in her place at that time, Brianna. And when we heard the verdict, I remember it was in the night. I don't remember what night it was, but we were in her car and we just screamed. We were just like, we cannot believe it. Like we just screamed. And that was a week just of me being there. And that could have been a foreshadowing, actually, to say this is going to be a different kind of experience here with you in Boston. Because then after that, we know then the next year was Mike Brown, and then it was like Eric Garner. Then everything and then everything just rose. And then that was me. It was like, that was my first time. That wasn't my first time participating in a protest. I had participated in a protest when the Jenna 6 thing happened back in, I think it was like 2007 or 2008. I remember some of my classmates and I at Oakwood, we were driving to Louisiana and with some of our professors and protested for the Jenna 6 back then. Yet the awareness that I had then is very different than the one I have now. So it definitely was. It was an awakening, and that awakening happened. So I'm so glad you mentioned that, John. That awakening happened once I had more proximity to whiteness.
I was gonna say, like,
it's very interesting.
Being proximate to whiteness, like, almost makes you have to make that decision of like, is this something that I'm gonna be okay with and like be supportive of? Like, once I see it for what it can be, or am I gonna like push back against it? And I think that's why I have such little respect for someone like Daniel Cameron. Like, I understand that Mitch McConnell is his mentor. And I'm like,
What?
forget the former
Interesting.
president who just left office, but you know, in my opinion, Mitch McConnell is probably the most evil white person walking the face of the earth. Um,
Well, at least
he has a lot of competition. So
I was gonna say Rush Limbaugh,
But
is
he's gone.
no longer. But that was gonna say, but he's no longer walking, and I don't
And
know.
I'm not saying rest in peace or anything like that. Bye.
yeah,
Okay. You gone.
I really like this mustard color. You know, that's how I feel about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was gonna say your background is amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I noticed how we all
I
got
love the
plants.
plants.
Yeah, got the plants in the background. So that's
Yeah.
how I feel. Yeah, man. Dopeness.
So, but yeah, you know that proximity to whiteness, and so yeah, so I have very little respect for people who see what whiteness can do to them and to the people who look like them, and then
Yeah.
double down in support of it. I'm like,
Mm,
no, I don't see it for you.
mm, mm, mm.
Hmm. Gotta let that sit for a second.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah. I had to stay there for a minute.
mm,
Let that breathe.
just let that. So then let's just talk about now, because we're talking about blackness here and being black and be black. Let's
Mhm.
talk about the different types of blackness, and so that's definitely a conversation nowadays more so than ever too. So
Sure.
Jackie, I remember you mentioning Judas and the Black Messiah. There was some controversy there about the lead actor. Can you say more about that?
Yeah, so you know, Daniel Kaluuya is British. He's like Afro British, um, and I do not remember like his like ancestry or exactly what country on the continent his people are from, but I know that there was controversy around him, and then there was controversy around Cynthia Erivo playing Harriet
Yeah.
Tubman
Mm-hmm.
because I think she's British as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so the idea that these great Black American icons needed to be also represented by Black American folks, um, which I think is connected to like the ADOS movement.
Mm-hmm. Can you say
Of
what that is for the people?
yeah, I think that's
African descendants of.
African, or is it American descendants of slaves?
I think it was. I thought it was
African
African descendants of
descendants.
slaves. I'll look
Um,
it up.
but it's
American.
basically
American descendants of slavery.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Okay. So basically, Black folks who are living in the U.S. who can trace their ancestry back to folks who were enslaved here, like in the American South. Um, and someone might correct me on if it's just the American South, because it's I have an interesting connection to um, the United States,
Mm.
but like through my ancestry, um, but yeah, I think the idea of like who gets to claim blackness and who gets to represent what it means to be black, and who gets to represent what it means to be American black, is an interesting conversation to me, because I do think that for folks who there's no black folk who is untouched by the legacy of colonialism. Like even if you are living on the continent right now, like you are not untouched by the legacy of colonialism. Um, and then if you are in the western half of the world, from Canada and whatever is higher than Canada, Antarctica, I guess, I don't know, all
Depends
the
on how
way
you look at the
down.
world.
Oh,
Mm.
touche, touche. All the way down through South America, like your life, your life has been touched by the legacy of slavery.
Mm.
Um, and then there's this whole other conversation about Black folks being indigenous to the US and like coming here before like
Yeah.
First Nations, indigenous folks, which I'm just getting, I'm just getting hip to that conversation. I'm like, I didn't even know that folks were like staking that claim. That's a whole nother thing of like, my ancestors were never enslaved. Like we came here before. So that's a whole nother, a whole nother conversation. Um, but yeah, I mean, I just think it's interesting, like who gets to claim this, but who also gets to represent like not only the U.S. legacy of slave. Well, I guess who gets to represent the legacy of slavery, um, and I I understand like different countries contributed to how Black folks were traded as property across the world, um, but the violence that was visited upon Black people does not feel distinct to me. There are some folks who are like, oh yeah, there were some owners who treated Black people fairly and gave them
Damn about that.
Nah, ain't
right.
nobody
Like
trying to hear that
I
shit.
don't right. I don't care about that.
Mm-mm.
We know by and large, like slavery was a really violent institution, and the legacies of the governments that have come out of that from Canada all down continue to practice violence against Black people. And I mean, I guess I'll also say that the whole ADOS argument is interesting to me in particular because it's hard for me to figure out how it's being defined. So I understand that it's like American descendants of slavery, but it seems to be really restricted to the southern states and within the US.
Oh, that's interesting.
I don't know
Ooh,
if
that's an
like,
even meta kind of
yeah, like
identity conflict there.
I don't even know if that's like entirely true. Someone can correct me. Um, if not, but um and I'll say like a lot of Black folks can be like, oh yeah, my grandmama and they from Louisiana, they from Mississippi, they from wherever. We used to go back there and visit aunties and whoever when we were kids or whatever the case is. A lot of folks have that story.
Mm-hmm.
But I think like, for example, what do we do with Puerto Rico? What do we do with the U.S. Virgin Islands?
Mm-hmm.
My mom is from the U.S. Virgin Islands, and
Mm-hmm.
so is her mom. And so, as far back as I know, and there's some trading that happened, like the U.S. Virgin Islands, like has changed hands. Puerto Rico has
Oh yeah,
changed hands.
British and all that.
Yeah, but like still when we're talking about it, what does that mean for how we consider an American descendant of slavery? Because I'm very much like I'm very clear that my family culturally is Caribbean. We don't at the holidays there are no collard greens, there's no fried chicken, there's macaroni and cheese. Like macaroni and cheese might be kind of universal, but but
It's
even
how
the way
you
we
make the macaroni and
yeah,
cheese,
it's
though. That's
different.
not
Like it's a
universal.
different
Yeah.
kind of mac and cheese.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's very clear, like culturally there's a distinction, but at the same time, like my mom has always had that blue passport that is important. My grandmother, she was allowed to travel. Well, she might not have actually. Now that I'm thinking about it, they didn't need a blue passport because you don't need a passport to travel between the mainland United States and the U.S. Virgin Islands.
Virgin Islands. Yeah.
So yeah, so for me, like this connection to Black identity and who gets to claim Blackness. I mean, I think part of it is like the identity of Blackness versus like an ethnicity of like African American, Afro Caribbean, Afro British, like whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like folks are staking a claim on Black, like Black applies to American.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I don't know. I don't think I agree with that because, my experience is very Black. Like when I walk out into the world, folks aren't asking me necessarily about my ethnicity. Like they're like, oh, there's a Black woman and they treat me accordingly.
Right. Yeah. Man, I mean, dog, Jackie, that was Jackie. She be hitting on. You be like,
It's
I wanna,
yeah,
I
it's
wanna,
so heavy.
I wanna. So that's difficult for me to even respond to all of that. But as I guess I'll tell kind of my own story. Maybe there'll be some links to a lot of what Jackie said. But I feel like I do have a certain feeling about number one, non-Black Americans playing Black American. I do. I don't know if that's a thing. Yeah, I don't know if that's a thing, but I feel like, you know, and I talked to my friend, one of my homeboys, he's Nigerian. We have a love-hate relationship with each other, mostly hate. It's mostly hate, but a little bit of love there since like I've known him for so long. And he watches like all the episodes, but I hate him. Anyway, right. But he talks about like how Forrest Whitaker played Idi Amin, you know what I'm saying? And there are like Denzel Washington played Stephen Biko, which I don't really think he did a very good job when he played Stephen Biko personally, you know what I'm saying? So I feel the same. I feel that other groups should feel the same way about their stories, right? That, you know, when Cynthia Erivo played Harriet Tubman, I saw the film. I loved the film. I think she did a phenomenal job. Yeah, I did. I really liked it. I thought she did a great job, but there was something missing. It was something that just couldn't, even if I didn't know she was British, there was something that didn't quite connect me.
That entire film, something was missing. But anyway, we'll come back to that. The whole film was missing from itself, is what it was.
Thought it was a good.
I liked it. I wanted to like. It was so critiqued that I thought I was gonna find a lot more.
Let's keep going.
Yeah, I thought it was, but it was something. It was something missing, and I say that because when you look at those top-notch biopics like Malcolm X, right? Or Ray, you know, or Tina Turner, Angela Bassett playing Tina Turner. I think there's something significant about when you have a certain African American experience, and then you're asked to play a role. Malcolm, I think Denzel was able to get into that Malcolm role, not just because he looked a lot like Malcolm in the movie, but because a lot of what Malcolm was saying, he himself was like, yeah, I agree with, because I've been through this myself. I think he grew up in Mount Vernon, but he had been around in Harlem and Brooklyn and all this. So he understood the New York, the super pro-Black experience, even if he himself wasn't a part of the nation or whatever, but he understood that life, that experience, that identity. And so to bring all of what he had to also reading and studying Malcolm and his teachings, it transformed on the screen. The fact that Jamie Foxx grew up in the American South, he grew up in a segregated Texas, right? Playing music. He talks about how, you know, the first time he was ever called a nigger, he was like 18 and he was playing for these rich white people on the other side of town. And, you know, they called him a nigger and all this other. So he was able to link with Ray's story of being a musician in the nigga, you know, all this other kind of stuff. So it's something about that. And I imagine they brought that to the screen. So even if you have like a Daniel Kaluuya, I think he did a phenomenal job with being Fred Hampton. You know, when you do see the movie, he had the accent down, he had the mannerisms, he did a great job, but I still saw Daniel Kaluuya. It was just something, I don't know. It was great, but it didn't get to the like amazing status like a Denzel or, you know, Angela Bassett or Jamie Foxx and Ray. You know what I'm saying? And so I say all that to say that I think that there needs to be a even more, a lot of times from what I see from a lot of my Caribbean folks, and I'm seeing more and more Caribbean folks, my African brothers and sisters, a certain distinction and an appreciation for the African American identity, just as much as African Americans need to have an appreciation for the Caribbean identity and the African identity. You know what I'm saying? Because we've all learned from each other. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, Marcus Garvey was inspired by Booker T. Washington. You know what I'm saying? And then Malcolm X was inspired by Marcus Garvey, and that's African American and that's Caribbean. But then you know, you have folks looking at what was going on in South Africa. Stokely Carmichael. I mean, Stokely Carmichael influenced a lot of Black Americans. You know what I'm saying? You know,
he is Black Power.
He is Black Power.
Black and I'm proud.
Yeah.
That's it. That came, and it's like we learn from each other. You know what I'm saying? And then from Stokely Carmichael, you get a Fred Hampton. From Fred Hampton and his stuff, then you get a Daniel Kaluuya. So it's like we're all in. So there has to be an appreciation. But sometimes what I see, particularly from some of my non-Black American friends, is there is this time period, and when some of them claim Blackness and then sometimes they don't. And I think it also could be a generational thing too, because I know many of them will say, well, my parents said I'm Jamaican or I'm Nigerian or I'm Liberian. I'm not Black, right? Now, I think we're in this time of Black Lives Matter and, you know, we're in this cultural explosion. All of the 2010s has been just this heightened Black identity that's been happening recently. I feel like now it's becoming cool again to be Black, but there's gonna. So what's gonna happen when Black is not as cool no more? Then our people distance themselves from, or when Black people do something stupid, like when 3 6 Mafia came and they got the Grammy for the song they did. Was it a Grammy or the Oscar? And they was acting crazy at the Oscars, and Black people was like, man, yo, this a bad day to be Black, because them brothers was looking real crazy up there on that Oscar stage. So it's not cool no more. You know what I'm saying? What's gonna happen then? And so I think it's important for us to continue to have these conversations. I love my Caribbean folks. I love my African folks. I love learning about all of the different histories. And I know a lot of them do appreciate the African American story, because had it not been for civil rights, you know what I'm saying? Had it not been for a lot of the movements or the HBCUs that we attended,
absolutely,
the African Americans helped to break. A lot of our Caribbean and African brothers and sisters came to those institutions and broke through from those movements. So, but a lot of that we learned from Marcus Garvey and, like you said, Stokely Carmichael and Nelson Mandela and, you know, Jomo Kenyatta and so many other people. So it's like, I think the more we appreciate the diversity of Blackness and understand that we're all, and that's a whole nother conversation, but do all identify with Africa. I think that's another piece.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I was just having this conversation. I was talking to two of my other friends, all of us pro-Black, all of us, you know what I'm saying, all about the people, but they was like, I ain't African. No, I'm Black American. I don't identify with Africa. That's just not my thing. You know what I'm saying? I'm all about being African. I'd rather you call me African than African American, but I think that's another layer. So it's so complicated.
And I think that is what makes just the conversation about what is Black such a deep and wide conversation, because one thing is being Black, it's about identity, and identity is constantly changing. It's constantly changing. Every single moment identity is changing. And so if it's every single moment it's changing within one individual, then if you look at a people collectively, and if you look at the passage of time, how does that identity constantly change? You know, how does the identity of Blackness or the identity of an African change once they are brought to another location? And so specifically in this instance, we're talking about America. And so then, okay, the identity of being an African, you know, during a period where your people are enslaved, and then what happens to that identity once your people are no longer enslaved, and then but at the same time, what happens when that identity, when those people are not quite enslaved, but the slavery has taken on something different, so now there's Jim Crow, and then also there's the terrorism that happens from white people who see you as Black, you know, being a freed African versus being an enslaved African. So it's like there's these shifts, and then there's the whole like being, I'm just trying to track history right now as being an American. And so then what happens when there's a war? And so then you are now American and you can fight in the war for this country. So are you as African as you are American? And now there's you're now generations removed from Africa. Right. And so now you are an American who can fight on another country's soil as an American and yet still face discrimination as a Black person now, because you're not African, but you're an American. So I can fight for this country. And then once I come back to this country, I am not looked at as an American at all. I'm a nigger. I'm all of these other things. And so I keep going. And then the civil rights movement happens. And what does it mean to be Black? And then also then the 70s happens. And then it's now actually the introduction of the term, I'm Black and I'm proud, right? And then you keep going and then it keeps happening. And so now
hip hop and all this other kind of stuff.
And then hip hop happens. And then it's just like the culture of Blackness begins to take shape in a different way. It's beginning to, we're seeing it in the arts, but we saw it in the arts from the 20s during the Renaissance or whatever that. And so it's like Black is becoming a culture. It's becoming a thing. People are expressing themselves, right? And so then you have all of this that's happening. And then now the internet age then makes the world flatter. And so now that it's flatter, we begin to see all these different types of Blackness and these different comparisons of Blackness.
That's such a good explanation.
So then you start to, so then Blackness becomes a whole lot more textured because we're able to connect with different types of Black people in different ways, and we're seeing different representations. And with that, because of the flatness, other people who are not Black are beginning to take claim to this Blackness, and they're beginning to appropriate and misappropriate all of this Blackness. And so now we're beginning to see this thing where it's just like, are you Black or not Black? We see the question of the protection of Blackness, right? Because now that culture, now we're taking ownership of that thing because we're seeing other people do it and we see them getting credit for it in ways that we can't get credit for. We see white girls wearing bamboo earrings. We see white girls put plastic in their bodies to try to represent the Black female form, or what's traditionally considered the Black female form, which is a whole nother issue. And then we see people wearing braids and calling them box braids or whatever the hell they call them now.
Boxer braids
and stuff, the things that are like quintessentially
looking
Black
like
women.
a boxer.
Exactly. And so then we see all of this happening, and then we begin to say, like, what does it mean to be represented as a Black person? What is Blackness? Right? It's constantly changing. And who gets to decide what it means to be Black?
Right.
Who gets to decide what it means to be a member of the diaspora, of the African diaspora? Because Africa, now that we have the internet, people are no longer looking at Africa as a country. You begin to see that Africa is composed of all of these different parts. To be African means to be also Egyptian, means to be Algerian, means to be Moroccan, and those people don't have the phenotype necessarily of what it means to be Black to us. Right? And so it's just like, is this, or if there's a South African, well, we didn't even talk about apartheid, but then it's just like, if you're a South African white person and you come to America, then are you African? American? Can we say that? Am I comfortable with that? Hell no, in some ways, but at the same time, I can't deny your roots. And so it's just like, there's such a nuance that's happening now. And I feel like it's good for us to grapple with it. It's good for us to grapple with our own identities. It's good for us to grapple with other people's identities to the point where it doesn't make us go crazy and where we can have peace. So going back to what Jackie said about even thinking about Daniel Cameron, we don't think about it. So how can I reflect on my own identity? How can I reflect on the identities of others to the point where I still have peace? How can I be, I think it's important for us to be gracious. I'm even thinking about my own identity as like how my Black identity has evolved and matured. So it's just like, how can I be gracious to myself? How can I be gracious to others? When I'm thinking about other people, am I wanting to give them grace, or am I wanting to take away grace? I want to pay attention to that kind of thing. And I will say for myself, at the end of the day, I want to give grace to my brothers and sisters, any person from the diaspora, because we have so many different experiences. And there's so many reasons why we identify and don't identify with different things. Why your friend is like, well, no, I'm an American, I'm not an African. It might be the same reason why my aunt when we were talking, she was like, yeah, I never really wanted to go to Africa. It's just like, I don't want to go there. It's just like, why? What messages have you seen that make you want to be distant from the motherland, or what I consider the motherland? But it's just like, I don't know. But at the same time, I'll give you grace. That's all I can do is just say, I don't know. I don't know. And, Godspeed, God be with you, And so I feel like this question will continue to evolve. We'll continue to have different feelings about it. And I think that's okay, because I think one thing that I do know is we want to be able to have permission to define Blackness for ourselves. I don't think that, I think the whole liberation movement, it's the same reason with like the feminist movement. It's just like, we just want to be able to be able to make our own choices. So as a Black person, can a Black person decide what Blackness is for them individually? Or does it have to be a collective decision? Are we a monolith? Doesn't that monolithic like reasoning take away from me as an individual? And isn't that what slavery is, in a sense? Isn't that not the point? That there can't be one definition, because that's not freedom.
Yeah.
So that's I have so much more with that, because when it comes to being Black and as a light-skinned Black person, it's like, am I challenged?
We didn't even get to that point.
We didn't get to colorism, because that's the thing for me where it's just like, I look like I'm lighter skinned. I have freckles, for those of you who can't see it. When I was growing up, I had more like red hair. So it's just like, am I less Black? And so then when people want to try to say, well, like when my spouse gets married, is he going to get criticism? I mean, my spouse gets married, when I get married to my spouse, will he get criticism for having a light-skinned Black woman? Versus it's just like, oh, you're not super Black because because we all know, and it's true, Obama got more credit because Michelle was a brown-skinned Black woman. Straight up, she did. He got more Black credit. And so it's just like, my spouse, is he gonna get the criticism? It's like, well, yeah, she Black, she Black, but she like light skin. He probably like them light skin Black. And it's just like, that's not fair to me. And yet it's like, I understand where they're coming from.
Yeah,
I get it. But anyway, we're at the end of our show, and we have a new segment called Takeout Boxes, where we're going to say what are our main takeaways that we want to give you for from each of the co-hosts. It could be an article, it could be something else, and so we're just going to shift into the takeout boxes. So I know I just spitfired, but like I'll start with what my takeout box will be. I encourage every person here to look up the song Nextel Chirp by Maceo. Maceo is Maceo. Please take a gander. Please listen to Nextel Chirp. I encourage you to listen to the lyrics, and I encourage you to see how it is similar to a Negro spiritual. That's my takeout box.
Takeout box.
Giving it to John and Jackie.
Okay.
I guess I get to look up this book. Like, I can think about it.
Well, John, while Jackie's doing that, do we want to go to John?
Yeah. My takeout box isn't a song or a book, but my takeout box, what I want people to take from this conversation is just an equal appreciation for all Black people except for R. Kelly, right? So any Black person besides R. Kelly, you know what I'm saying? Like, we can have an appreciation for what they bring to our experience. Even, I'm hoping Daniel Cameron turns around, but I'm not sure. I'm leaning more towards Jackie. Like, you didn't stand up for our sister. So you kind of in the R. Kelly box a little bit, like you kind of going into that area for me. But in all seriousness though, like I want all ethnicities within the African diaspora. I would love for us, even if everybody doesn't connect with Africa or say they're African, that's fine. That's a whole nother conversation. But at least have an appreciation for what Caribbeans bring to our, for that history, and for African history, and for Afro-British history, and for Afro-Latina history, and for, Afro-Asiatic history, and just having, and African Americans, like everything that we bring to who we are globally as Black people. And actually, I do have a book or a series. If you could look up the African presence and it's like every continent. It's by Runoku Rashidi. Runoku Rashidi, Rashidi. And he has a series of the African presence in America, the African presence in Asia, the African presence in Australia, the African presence in, Europe. And when you read that, you'll see just like out of Africa, just the beauty of who we are all over the place. And you just have a much greater appreciation, I believe, for just being blessed to be who we are, to be who God made us, which is, to be Black and to be proud. So check that out.
Yeah, I had to look up the book, and now I feel silly that I didn't remember the name of the book.
Is it
Because I knew that it
phenomenal?
was a
You
that's my
love you some
default.
phenomenal.
It's not even,
She is
I
a
forgot
Fanonite.
it's him. That's like he's Caribbean too. So
That's identity all day.
yeah. No, it was about Stokely Carmichael because there was so much stuff that I didn't know about him, like his history, his background, like how he began to understand like his own like black identity.
Mm.
But anyway, the book about Stokely Carmichael is called Stokely. Peniel Joseph. I don't know if I pronounced his first name right, but it's called Stokely. Subtitle is A Life. And I just thought it was such a good book. Like I was looking for something to understand like the Black Power movement. And obviously like it's a little bit more about like Stokely Carmichael. But it's a good read. Even if you know you kind of skip back and forth through it. Yeah, and I think just for dissertation stuff, I got a little bit into Marcus Garvey and some of what he was teaching around Pan Africanism.
Your dissertation
Which
gonna
I
be
think is kind of
crazy. I
It's
can't
gonna be
wait to
so
read
good.
that joint. I can't wait to read that joint, bro. It's gonna be lit.
from your lips to God's ears.
That joint gonna be crazy, bro. I know it.
Yeah.
I know it.
But you know, just getting into Marcus Garvey and some of his teachings, I think is helpful for re-engaging with a black identity that is not necessarily rooted in ethnicity, which I mean, I'm not knocking ethnicity. I think that, you know, American, British, Caribbean, Canadian, like whatever your ethnicity is important. It adds a lot to the texture. I like that word, Amber. Of how black folks are and like how we like share across cultures or whatever. But yeah, the idea of us being just really connected and rooted in continental Pan Africanism is, I think, sitting with me. So,
Cool.
I'm there.
Yo,
All right. Another episode.
Another episode, season 2. We kicking it off, baby. It's been another episode of Street Academy Podcast where we keep one foot in the academy and one foot in the streets. Yo, please leave comments or hit us up. Yo, our IG been popping. You know what I'm saying? Once we got the IG, we got almost 50 followers right now, bro. Like, we rolling. You know, we doing the thing. Yo, we just uploaded some pictures. We did a whole photo shoot for season 2. You know what I'm saying? So it's happening. Street Academy Podcast rolling. So inbox us, leave comments, let us know what you think about things we've been saying, whether you agree or disagree, whatever is fine. That's what this, you know, platform is about. Yeah, we just gonna keep coming up with videos, and you know, we gonna keep moving. What else? I think that's it. Hit us up. Our email address, streetacademypodcast@gmail.com. If you have any ideas on shows or anything you want us to talk about, feel free to inbox us either individually or at our IG, or you could email us. You can find me, Jonathan Grant, at jpaulgrant on IG. Jackie.
At Jacket's Mission, at everything.
And at Amber Camila. I don't be on social media, but yeah.
She really don't be on that mug. She don't. I be sending Amber messages. She get back like a month and a half later. Nah, she don't. But hit her up though.
Everybody except Amber.
Yeah, just inbox me. You can inbox me and Jackie. You good.
It may or may not change. I go in and out.
Right.
But I like when you say, John, all hearts and mind clear.
Oh, I forgot. Yes.
I feel like that's a great way to close.
I know. I forgot. It's been so long. Yes. So all hearts and minds clear.
Yes.
We good.
Everybody good. Everybody feeling good, feeling great, feeling good, feeling great. How about you? All right, y'all. It's been another episode. We
Peace
out.
Up, A-Town down.
Boom, 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 boom.
Hey.
Boom, 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 boom. I ain't never heard this song.
Hear me, dog. Come see me.
Come see me.
This was the mid 2000s when it took like a minute and a half to get the song started. Hey.
Nothing fails time and no time and no time. Nothing fails time and no time and no time. Fails time and no time and no time.
Okay.
But you know, got their feet upon the neck of the haters, the game and the devil like came in.